Hello, Sarnaud, and welcome to another video. This time we're gonna cover the Bard PvE DPS class because that's gotten a huge boost in how it works in the game. I mean, how it works is still the same, but the numbers have been increased dramatically. It's really cool. It's fun to see Bard DPS as being more relevant now because you see more different classes as a DPS in dungeons, in raids. It's just more variety. It's good. Now, Bard has been increased by a ton. We'll go over the patch notes first that changed Bard so drastically in 30.0. So let's just see the patch notes here on the screen. Basically are saying that Cresendo has increased by a ton. That's why you're gonna see Bards using Cresendo now more than before. That wasn't a thing before, so that's really cool and fun to see. You see, in general, it's a full buff to the Bard. All the damage has been scaled up, everything is increased. Sonata no longer dispels fear group, so disorient, fear, those things are no longer dispellable or purifiable, to be correct. Where can I imagine it giving problems? It is the Dead King hard mode. It's gonna give trouble there because you'll have to purify with Sonata really quick on the poison dots. If you're too late on purifying the poison dots, fear is applied to everybody, and that's gonna give trouble. Now there's a Ruby description that is wrong here. Dance of Passion, bonus to Singing Blades damage is now increased, blah 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 blah. So the bonus description on the patch notes is correct. Alas, in game on the description it is wrong. It says Singing Blade increases the damage of a Flying Blade. That is not true, because when we use a Dancing Blade, you'll see that it increases the Singing Blade. So Dancing Blade buffs Singing Blade. It has the same icon as well, so I'm assuming that's why it is wrongly translated on the description. So just so you know that, because it's also confusing because it has the exact same text for the next Ruby, which is Passionate Song. Singing Blade increases damage of Flying Blade, as you can see. So assume here that Dancing Blade increases Singing Blade damage. And that's going to be important later on our rotation because it's a very straightforward rotation for the Bard. As you can see, they have buffed the damage increases they were giving as well, and Cresendo has been given attention to as well. Can be now used during moving on DPS, which is very helpful to avoid mistakes in circles and positionals. Increases all damage dealt by Bard, not just Etudes, that is this Ruby. So that's a buff in general. And then they changed the location of two rubies, and that is the Creditorial and high frequencies. These are these rubies. So when people that are logging in on Bard's DPS build that have been not before, you'll see that your rubies will be now on willpower. You could probably think, what the heck? But you've been giving free build resets for a week on your mail, so you'll be able to reset that for free and make adjustments. Now for the gameplay, I'm gonna quickly say first, the build that I'm using in this video is in the link in the description. For the stats, it's basically just PvE DPS base stats, so you want to have your determination the highest. I would recommend for longer fights, raid bosses, you want to have brutality over proficiency. If it's just normal sector 1 dungeons or it's simple PvE that doesn't last longer than a minute combat time, I would say go proficiency over brutality. So brutality scales with your combat time. The longer a fight lasts, the more useful brutality will become. So keep that in mind. Think ahead of time what is more useful to you, and just simply change that. Determination is for sure the best stat here. Supremacy is a good stat, but I don't think it's as beneficial for the bards as before. It's more for support, I believe, because it's gonna help you get your tempo faster. I don't think you really need it on the DPS. I've been playing with 120 Supremacy now, which is the lowest base, and I have had no problems using my rotation. So I don't know. I wouldn't say Supremacy is needed, but we're very early in the season. We're still on green gear. We don't have too much stats to play around with. So I'm not using Supremacy for now. I'm going in full base. As you've seen the stats and the build in the description, we'll go over the rotation now. We're gonna start with single target DPS. For single target, usually what I do is when combat's about to begin, I start with solo, because solo is going to buff your single target damages. To quickly explain the difference between solo and requiem, because these are basically, you could see them as enhancers on your gun. We have a guitar of course, but I'm just saying as a metaphor. Solo is just increasing your single target damage, while Requiem leaves your abilities as they are, but makes it AOE, and it's going to deal a percentage of that damage on your main target to targets around them, but only 50%. So that's an AOE. Starting with single target damage, we're gonna do solo. And I will always start with Singing Blade. Now this might be something that most people will not understand, but I just do it out of habit because it's going to prepare your dots and your determination to do Flying Blade, which is going to be a dot. As you can see, Singing Blade will buff Flying Blade. Flying Blade won't buff anything. This is basically the end of your rotation, but every time you do a Disharmony, you're going to get a buff called Dagger Waltz, which is going to increase the damage of your Dancing Blade. So then we go for Dancing Blade. And then your solo stacks will have been used, your 3 stacks, because every time you use an Etudes, which is one of your casting abilities, you're going to consume a solo stack, which is going to increase their damage by 35% at this point. So basically you have 3 of them. You have 3 abilities, so it's quite obvious. How you start is up to you really, but I'm just used to Singing Blade, so I go with Singing Blade. Every time basically you're out of tempo to use the next ability, I use Disharmony, but other than that I'm not really using Disharmony. I rather use my Etude abilities because those are the highest dealing damages. And you repeat like this, you just keep popping up solo, do your rotation from Singing to Flying to Dancing Blade, and every time you're out of tempo you use Disharmony. It's that simple. Once you've gotten used to that, we're going to throw in Cresendo in there. Cresendo is an ability that used to be really bad before, but now it's really the king of your abilities. Think it like this: every time you use an ability, you use a global cooldown, and you have to try to use the biggest damage dealing ability that a global cooldown could use. So Cresendo at this point, if you look at the description, has 22k damage. Flying Blade is only 13k and applies a dot, of course. Singing Blade is 3.6k, which is a dot as well. And then Dancing Blade, which is our highest damage dealing Etude damage ability, is only 5.8k, but damages 4 times, that's about 20k as well. It's about the same. But Cresendo is also an AOE, and it deals 50% damage to all around, which is basically the same thing as Requiem does for your Etudes. Now bear in mind here, this is a quick explanation between these two. You have on board Etudes and you have Chords. Chords is a different type of ability. Where does this play relevance? On the first grid in the board at the bottom, there you have a ruby that says that Etudes apply Omen of Death. That means that every ability that has Etude, you can see the red text. Basically these 3 abilities are Etudes. These abilities apply this debuff on your target, Omen of Death, which is going to increase the critical chance of your Chords, which is Disharmony and Cresendo. So you want to make sure that you start with an Etude before you do any Chord, because it's going to increase their critical chance. It will also increase your Disharmony damage, but I don't think that's connected to the buff. It's just a passive buff because you have these rubies. Alright, once we've said that, once that's in order, I would say also Cresendo is an AoE ability basically, but I would use it every time of cooldown regardless of AoE or single, because it's such a hard hitting ability and it has extra chance to crit because of the passive. If it does crit, it deals 150% more damage, which is going to make it the best ability you can do on a global cooldown. It has a cast time of only 1 second as well, which is just as long as a global cooldown. People that watch my mage video will understand that the global cooldown is just as good as a cast time of 1 second. So it makes no negative impact on your DPS. So what I always do, Singing Blade, you apply the buff, I get some extra tempo, and I go for Cresendo right after. Cresendo has a cooldown of 40 seconds, but every time you use an Etude, so one of these 3 abilities, you reduce the cooldown by 10 seconds. That means in about every 3 abilities you do, your cooldown will be off. The last 10 seconds are going to be gone because of global cooldowns you do in between for casting, channeling, and using Disharmonies. So by the time you use 3 abilities, it will be off cooldown and you can use Cresendo. So try to use Cresendo every 3 Etudes you do, plus the time it takes in between to use Disharmony to keep your tempo up. Your Cresendo will be off cooldown, and make sure you spam it because it's a really good hitting ability. Now it also applies wounds. It's not as useful for PvE, but people that play Bard for PvP are going to be useful here because they're going to apply wounds on a AoE. On all the targets, it's going to help a lot on bursting down groups of players. But that is PvP, that is not for this video. So that is for the single target DPS ratio, really. Not much to tell about. It's a very simple rotation. It's very brain dead. So just Singing Blade, Flying Blade into Dancing Blade. Use Cresendo off cooldown every time. If you want to be more specific as well, if you want to push more damage and you're used to the rotation, try to, what I would do is you have an ability called Tunes of War, which increases your damage by another 20% for 8 seconds. I would do it right before Cresendo, and make sure you have enough tempo as well. There we go. And we're gonna see if we can do another Cresendo on the... No, that's not gonna happen. So you can do only one Cresendo on the Tunes of War. Make sure that you have a Cresendo and a Dancing Blade falling in that buff of Tunes of War, because it's a good 20% and it's gonna help a lot. I think it's much less effective on the dots you apply with your Singing Blade and your Flying Blade. Alright, moving on from single target to AoE. AoE is much more fun to do and it's much more simple to do as well. You start with the Requiem, because Requiem is going to make all your Etudes into an AoE with only 50% damage dealt to targets around your main target. And I would do only Dancing Blades for AoE. So you just spam the Dancing Blade every time you can with your tempo. And if you're out of tempo, you use Disharmony. Now bear in mind that every Disharmony you do is going to increase your Dancing Blade by 60% up to 3 stacks. That is 180% more damage at max. But considering it's only 60% more damage for your global cooldown you spent, whereas you can do 100% by doing the ability itself, I would suggest not to pay attention to the buff and only use the Disharmony to get your tempo back, and just consider the buff a passive that you get for doing Dancing Blades. Again, the Cresendo has to be done off cooldown as well. I would do it right after the first Etude because of the critical chance you can get with Cresendo. And as you can see, every new Dancing Blade you do is going to reduce the cooldown by 10 seconds. Which is really good. I really love the change they've done to Bard at this point. And that is really what all AoE is about. I would not use Singing Blade, it does not do enough AoE damage to keep up.
Look at all this
Whereas
damage!
you could do Dancing Blades. Flying Blade is a questionable ability. It might be good because the description says it does enough damage, but considering you won't have the Flying Blade buffs from your Singing Blades because you're not using Singing Blades, I would not use Flying Blades because it's outmatched by the Dancing Blades it does, plus the buff you get from your Disharmonies to get tempo. That is why I would not use Flying Blades, because it's not getting buffed from the Singing Blade. That's really all there is. It's that simple. Bard is a very easy class to play. It's very beginner friendly as well. If you're not sure what to play and you want to play a good DPS class, Bard is the way. Again as well, try to use Tunes of War in your rotation. Maybe try to do it right before as many stacks as you can get for Dancing Blade, so you can get the maximum out of that percentage. But there's not much really to explain about this. Another really good AoE ability you should not forget about is your Expression. Expression is a tier skill ability, so you do need Dragon Tears for this one, but it's a very good ability to have for AoE. It's basically a dot for 10 seconds. It's enormously strong, so I would really use Expression only during Tunes of War to get the most out of it, because the cooldown is quite long. It's 3 minutes, so you want to make sure that you use it correctly. So don't forget to use Expression during your Tunes of War when you're doing AoE. Nothing you do affects the damage except for Tunes of War. Simply also make sure that you have maximum determination before you do it. But that is all there is to explain really. Some utility I would like to explain, some utility that Bard has here is Overture. It is a dispel that you can do with a 7 seconds cooldown. Where I would recommend you for sure having it is Fenian's Cloister, the last boss. You would really be helpful to have it there, so you can dispel the boss and make it easier for your tank and your support. Basically your whole party overall. We're not using March because March is not a good ability for AoE. The only reason I would see us taking March is if the Ruby Drums of War would work, but it's a support only Ruby, so then I would never mind it, I would leave it, because the weakness would be really helpful to use. That's all there is really to it. There's not much to explain about this. I hope this was helpful, guys. If you're new to the game, if you're new to Bard, I hope this guide has helped you. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. For people that want to ask more questions directly, the link to join our Discord on the Smuggler's Paradise Discord is in the description. We're doing giveaways there, events, community events there for players on our server for pay to play, and events are going to come in the future for marks of accomplishments as well. I just want to announce this because a lot of people are interested in this. If you're not sure what marks of accomplishments are, they're kind of a premium currency that you can get by doing in-game events, forum events, Discord events, community events really. So make sure to check that out. If you're not sure what marks are, link in the description to explain about marks. I'll see you guys on the next video. Have a good game. See you in Sun out. Bye bye.